I'm here to read you a very special magical story called The Polar Express, which was written and illustrated by Chris van Allsburg. In fact, the pictures are so magical in this book that it even won the Caldecott Medal. Let's start. On Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound a friend had told me I'd never hear, the ringing bells of Santa's sleigh. There is no Santa, my friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night, I did hear sounds, though not of ringing bells. From outside came the sounds of hissing steam and squeaking metal. I looked through my window and saw a train standing perfectly still in front of my house. I'll show you the picture there, looking outside the window. It was wrapped in an apron of steam, and snowflakes fell lightly around it. A conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars. He took a large pocket watch from his vest, then looked up at my window. I put on my slippers and my robe. I tiptoed downstairs and out the door. "All aboard," the conductor cried out. I ran up to him. "Well," he said, "are you coming?" "Where?" I asked. "Why, to the North Pole, of course," was his answer. "This is the Polar Express." I took his outstretched hand and he pulled me aboard. There's the train. There's the Polar Express. The train was filled with other children, all in their pajamas and nightgowns, and we sang Christmas carols and ate candies with nougat centers as white as snow. We drank hot cocoa as thick and rich as melted chocolate bars. Outside, the lights of towns and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced northward. It's inside the train as they were having their snacks. Soon, there were no more lights to be seen. We traveled through cold, dark forests where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from our train as it thundered through the quiet wilderness. Some quiet forests there. We climbed mountains so high, it seemed as if we would scrape the moon. But the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster, we ran along, rolling over peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. Those mountains there. The mountains turned into hills, and the hills to snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice, the Great Polar Ice Cap. Lights appeared in the distance. They looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner sailing on a frozen sea. "There," said the conductor, "is the North Pole." The North Pole. Well, it was a huge city standing alone at the top of the world, filled with factories where every Christmas toy was made. At first, we saw no elves. "Well, they are gathering at the center of the city," the conductor told us. "That is where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas." "Who receives the first gift?" we all asked. The conductor answered, "He will choose one of you." Look at the magical North Pole and all those little lights. It's a sparkling city. "Look," shouted one of the children, "the elves." Outside, we saw hundreds of elves. As our train drew closer to the center of the North Pole, we slowed to a crawl. So crowded were the streets with Santa's helpers. When the Polar Express could go no farther, we stopped, and the conductor led us outside. Look at all those little elves that just filling the streets there. We pressed through the crowd to the edge of a large open circle. In front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and they paced, and they were ringing the silver sleigh bells that hung from their harnesses. It was a magical sound, like nothing I had ever heard. Across the circle, the elves moved apart, and Santa Claus appeared, and the elves cheered wildly. He marched over to us, and pointing to me, he said, "Let's have this fellow here." He jumped into his sleigh, and the conductor handed me up. I sat on Santa's knee, and he asked, "Now, what would you like for Christmas?" There's Santa as he appeared in the middle of the North Pole. I knew that I could have any gift that I could imagine, but the thing that I wanted most for Christmas was not inside Santa's giant bag. What I wanted more than anything was one silver bell from Santa's sleigh. When I asked, Santa smiled, and then he gave me a hug, and he told an elf to go ahead and cut a bell from a reindeer's harness. The elf tossed it up to Santa. He stood holding the bell high above him and called out, "The first gift of Christmas." And there he is, there's Santa giving the first gift of Christmas. A clock struck midnight as the elves roared their approval. Santa handed the bell to me, and I put it in my bathrobe pocket. The conductor helped me down from the sleigh. Santa shouted out the reindeers' names and cracked his whip, and his team charged forward and climbed into the air. Santa circled once above us and then disappeared in the cold, dark polar sky. Santa had to get ready to deliver his presents here. As soon as we were back inside the Polar Express, the other children asked to see the bell. I reached into my pocket, but the only thing I felt was a hole. I had lost the silver bell from Santa Claus's sleigh. "Let's hurry outside and look for it," one of the children said. But the train gave a sudden lurch and started moving, and we were on our way home. And it was too late, and he was sad because he lost the bell. It broke my heart to lose the bell. When the train reached my house, I sadly left the other children. I stood at my doorway and waved goodbye. The conductor said something from the moving train, but I couldn't hear him. "What?" I yelled out, and he cupped his hands around his mouth and he said, "Merry Christmas," he shouted, and the Polar Express let out a loud blast from its whistle and sped away. Here he is, coming home after the Polar Express adventure. On Christmas morning, my little sister Sarah and I opened our presents, and when it looked as if everything had been unwrapped, Sarah found one last small box behind the tree. It had my name on it. Inside was a silver bell. There was a note. "Found this on the seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket. Signed, Mr. C." I shook the bell. I shook the bell. And it made the most beautiful sound my sister and I had ever heard. But my mother said, "Oh, that's too bad." "Yes," said my father, "it's broken." And when I'd shaken the bell, my parents had not heard a sound. Here they are, finding that magical bell that Santa somehow slipped under the tree. At one time, most of my friends could hear the bell, but as years passed, it fell silent for all of them. And even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear its sweet sound. Though I've grown old, The bell still rings for me as it does for all who truly believe. And there's a picture of the bell. And so if you continue to believe and you keep that magical spirit of Christmas in your heart, you will always be able to hear the sweet sound of the Christmas bell. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy holidays. Happy New Year.